Welcome to AHA Talks. I'm Cheyanne Sauter, the CEO of AHA Projects, and we support change makers like you with tools and resources you need to do work in your community. Follow us on Instagram and check out our website to keep up with all the exciting things we're up to. This collection of videos will provide bite-sized learning that you can apply immediately to your work. I'm so excited to talk about this topic. So many people come to us and say, how do I start a nonprofit? I have this amazing idea and I want to start receiving money right away. How do we tell them to do this?
Well, I always recommend that people get the advice of someone that knows, either has been through the process or does it professionally, because there are so many missteps that you can make when you're forming a nonprofit, and especially doing things like applying for tax exemptions with the IRS. It's a big deal. So getting advice from experienced people would be the very first thing I advise. Secondarily, just knowing the process. And for me, I always like to explain the process as a two-step process, because the first step is with the state, and generally that means that you form a nonprofit corporation with the state, and it can be in any state, wherever you're living, wherever you're planning on conducting your operations. It doesn't have to be exclusively in those states, so the operations can expand beyond state borders. But forming that entity with the state is the very first step. And then you have to take the supplemental step if you want your tax exemption. And when I use the term tax exemption, I'm referring to 501c3 entities, C6s, C4s. Those are kind of the more common types of entities. But in order to obtain those designations, you actually have to apply to the IRS after you take that first step and form your entity with the state.
So let's say I'm in Nevada and I want to start a nonprofit to help foster animals. How do I go about filing with the state? Do I go to Carson City and hand them paperwork? What paperwork am I bringing? And who do I talk to there at the offices?
They make it really easy at the state to form your nonprofit corporation. The documentation that gets filed with the state is called the Articles of Incorporation. That's what brings your entity, your nonprofit corporation, into existence. You can go down and visit the office in Carson City. They're very helpful down there, and file your articles that way. Or they have an online website that allows for you to do it electronically called Silver Flume, and that's the name of the place that you go on the Secretary of State's website to file your articles. They have simple forms. The thing that I'd recommend keeping in mind when you're completing those forms is that those forms don't necessarily have all of the information that's needed in order to take the second step with the IRS to apply for your tax exemption. So this is where you kind of want to make sure you have someone experienced in the formation of nonprofits, because you don't want to have to go back and amend your articles if you're trying to get your tax exemption. But going to Silver Flume, filing your articles, and then just having a good understanding of the additional corporate paperwork that's required for any nonprofit to be in existence. And that includes bylaws, which are your governing documents that outline the rules of operations for your entity.
If I could go back to the state, so you mentioned articles of incorporation. Do I have to have a board of directors ready to go in that article of incorporation? Do I need to know who's going to be managing this nonprofit at that state level?
So it's required for you to have some knowledge of the participants, because you will have to put on that form for your articles. You will need to designate who your board members are and who are the authorized persons that are authorized to act on behalf of the nonprofit. But as we know, things change when you are going through the process of starting something new, and this isn't just for nonprofits either. You're not exactly sure who's going to say yes to being on your board, who's going to say no. Positions change, so having at least your founding board members in place is important because you will have to designate those individuals so that there's someone authorized to act on behalf of the entity. But of course, it changes, and you can make those changes as you go along.
Articles of incorporation, that is specific to nonprofits. What is the correlating document when it comes to an LLC or corporation?
So actually, nonprofit corporations and for-profit corporations both file articles of incorporation. The documents that LLCs file to bring their entity into existence are called articles of organization, but they're very, very similar. They're just called two different things. So, but for-profits and not-for-profit corporations, those two articles are called the same thing for corporations.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Okay, so I filed with the state. Secretary of State in Nevada is thrilled that I'm starting this nonprofit to help animals, foster them. How much time do I have between that moment and filing with the IRS to kind of organize my bylaws? Do I have to do it the next day, or do I have some time?
You have a ton of time. So there's no time limit actually if you are not concerned about when your actual tax exemption becomes effective. But for most people, they want their tax exemption to be effective on the date that they form the entity, so that all donations that they receive are tax exempt from initial start of operations. So from the filing of your articles. Generally, you have 36 months from inception in order for the tax exemption to retroactively apply to your date of formation. But there's ways to extend that. And of course, if you don't file it within those timeframes, it doesn't mean that you can never get a tax exemption. It just means that it might not retroactively apply to the date of formation.
I love that. Okay, so let's say I start my nonprofit with the state. My grandmother hands me $5,000. That money, at that date, is not considered tax exempt until the IRS has told me, yes, you are an approved organization.
Yes, that's correct. And a lot of people are confused, like, well, there's the date of formation, but usually you have to pay fees in order to form the entity, and there's a lot of confusion about the fees that are paid. There's ways to account for those funds that are provided for startup so that you can kind of tag on those startup funds onto the tax exemption if you do end up obtaining it. And that's a funny thing about tax exemptions is usually you don't know that you received approval from the IRS on your tax exemption for many, many months, if not years, after your date of formation. So you're doing fundraising for the organization, but you can't make promises to the donors that you're actually tax exempt because you haven't received that determination letter from the IRS yet. So you can't make promises to those donors, but what you can tell them is that, hey donor, we have applied for our tax exemption. We expect to receive it, but we cannot give you a determination letter at this time. And so you basically are not promising to provide that tax deductible donation until you receive your tax exemption.
That makes sense. I love that. Okay, so I'm ready to file with the IRS. You mentioned bylaws. Can you walk me through what the bylaws should outline for a nonprofit?
So bylaws are, like I said, they're the rules of operation for the legal entity. So the rules should dictate, are there members to your organizations? There are tax-exempt nonprofit organizations that have a membership body that is involved. Either they pay dues or they provide other services, or maybe they attend meetings and make decisions. So the very first step you want to take is determining whether or not there's going to be a membership and whether that membership will have decision-making capacity. Second is, how is a board of directors structured and what decision-making do they have and how are they elected? So if there's a membership body, it might be that the membership elects the board of directors, or there might not be a membership body and the board of directors is named as the governing body that makes the decisions, and it's a self-sustaining body where if there's a vacancy, the remaining directors elect those new directors to fill those vacancies. So all of those types of rules of operation are outlined in the bylaws. And then also just general policies and procedures related to operations for the officership. So if board of directors will vote in officers are tasked with the day-to-day operations. The bylaws will dictate what positions are available for filling by the board of directors for those officer positions and what job duties they have. And then that's kind of the governing structure for the organization, and all of that is outlined in the bylaws.
So that document, I'm sure I can go onto AI and find or have them write something for me, or go to LegalZoom and have them just kind of tape something together. But it sounds like that bylaw, that document, is helping you really think through how you want to structure the organization.
Yeah, and there's no one size fits all, because you might be an organization that operates off of a really big volunteer base, and you want those volunteers to be members and to participate in certain decision making because it empowers them and keeps them engaged. Or you're a working board and you need a larger board, say more than 10 people, because you don't have employees of the organization, and so you need to dictate a bigger board than a standard board. Or you just have other specific organizational structure items that you want, and you're just not going to get that specific type of outline that you would get with someone that's specifically advising you about your organization. So I see a lot of AI stuff. It's getting better, but again, this is kind of the crux of the AI issue, is that you just don't know if it's going to work specifically for your organization.
Yeah, and I believe I use AI. AI has become a powerful tool, but in nonprofit world, we are in the business of supporting and helping people. And so I really think you should lean on people to help you develop all of your documents.
And you want to get it right too. There's other pieces that are state law and IRS, Internal Revenue Code specific provisions that are required for tax exemptions. I don't know that there's that expertise level yet in those types of tools. And so you got to just be careful about what you pull off and whether or not you're complying with state or Internal Revenue Code specific requirements.
So let's talk about cost. How much typically does it cost if I do it on my own, or if I bring in an expert? How much am I looking at for that startup capital that I need?
So the formation of the nonprofit with the state is pretty inexpensive. In the state of Nevada, it costs less than $200 to form the legal entity. That's just filing the articles and your initial list, which is your list of your initial board members and officers. But then you would have to create your own organizational documents. So it's pretty inexpensive, but you'd need to probably you'd have someone on your team, hopefully, that would be able to help you provide some guidance on the governing documents. And then with regards to your tax exemption, that runs, it depends depending on the size of your organization. So if you qualify to file a short form 1023, which is your application for tax exemption, then it's about $275 filing fee. And that's if you don't have help completing that document with a professional, either a consultant, a CPA, or an attorney or something like that. And then if you're doing the long form, it's $600 for the filing fee for the IRS for that tax exemption. If you retain legal counsel, generally I'd say it would cost you between $2,000 and $3,000 for an entity formation. And then depending on how much help you need in completing your application for tax exemption, I'd say it can run anywhere between $2,000 and $5,000.
That's great.
Depending on how much you want to do.
Yeah. And you mean how much you want the attorney to do, or how much?
Yeah, either way. So that form can be a little tricky. I always recommend with the application for your tax exemption that you complete it and at least have it reviewed by counsel, because they can catch things that would be problematic in the application process that could delay the approval of your tax exemption.
So just to recap, I start with filing articles of incorporation to the state at which I'm going to be operating in, or the state that you're comfortable filing. And then creation of bylaws so that I can file my 1023 with the IRS. And there are two different 1023s. Is it 1023N, which is kind of the postcard form or the short form, and then 1023 regular?
So the N is usually the 990, which is the tax return you file, has a 990N, which is the short postcard. The 1023 application, there are two forms. One is I refer to as the long form, and it's the one where you don't apply for the EZ form, which is the second form. So 1023 EZ is really very simple, but it's for smaller organizations that qualify for an exemption, basically to use that EZ form. So two different types. One is just longer than the other one and requires more information.
So I understand there are multiple types of nonprofits out there. There's 501, which is the IRS designation. C is specific to nonprofits, but then there are probably 20 or 30. So you can get a 501c14, 501c6. What are the most common ones, and which ones do you recommend a traditional nonprofit filing for?
So there's the most common that you hear about is a 501c3. That's a charitable, religious, educational, or scientific type of organization that does charity work. And a charitable organization is kind of the basis for this C3 designation. This is the type of designation that allows for donations to be tax exempt. And it does have restrictions, so no lobbying allowed. So if you want to lobby or do any campaigning, that's strictly prohibited activity for that type of organization. And then there's two other main types of organizations that you see a lot of. And the first one is a 501c4 organization, which is a social welfare type of organization. And basically it's civic leagues, public interest groups, homeowners associations, things like that, that have a public service type of component or social welfare type of component in it. Those C4 organizations, the donations are not tax exempt, but you can do some lobbying and other political activities that are not permitted in the C3 organization. And then the last of the common ones is the C6 organization, which is the organizations that promote common interests. And those are things like chambers of commerce, business leagues, boards of trade, like the Realtor Association, things like that. They're tax exempt, but again, the donations are not tax deductible, although those types of organizations usually are membership fee driven, and membership fees paid to those organizations can be a deductible business expense. They're just not deductible as a line item as a charitable donation. So those are kind of the three major types of C organizations that you see.
Important designations, and explains why you should at least consult with an attorney or a CPA to figure out how you want to form your nonprofit. Let us know what other videos you want us to produce, or if we can dive deeper into any one of these topics. If we don't have the answers, we definitely know someone that does. Thank you.